And this is what we aim to complete within this first hour of courses. In here, we have our image, our top header, along with some text and a button. We also have basic user input to allow us to put text. And we'll be also handling click events, so for when a user clicks on this. But this is what we expect to see at the end of our first hour of courses. This will be also split upon three lectures, so each being 20 minutes. So in our project setup, we're going to have to rely on Node.js, which is our node package manager, along with our JavaScript runtime environment. We'll also need to rely on Expo and Expo CLI, which is a wrapper library that goes around React Native. It provides several features and methods to running and handling Expo. We'll also go over the main project files, one being app.js, package.json, and node modules. App.json is essentially the main file to be executed when we run our React Native project. Package.json will list all of our JavaScript packages and libraries that we've downloaded, and this will all be read by our node package manager that we discussed before. And our node modules folder basically holds all the packages or all the JavaScript libraries that we've downloaded through npm or yarn. Hey there, welcome. In this course, we're going to be learning advanced React Native, and we're going to be building a game review website, allowing the users to write reviews for the games, publish it, and be able to view all the reviews they've made before. This is part of a 5-hour mini course bundle, and this is our first course. In this course, we'll be learning how to build the React Native app with adaptive user interface. So a little bit about myself. My name is Shreeman. I've run React Native code for a while. I can say about 3 years, both professionally and in regards to school and side projects as well. So I have a good grasp on React Native and what things you can implement with this. I've implemented tools such as Redux, which allows user state, user input, things like Firebase, cloud authentication, cloud storage, and there's a lot to come with React Native, and I'm here to help you along that way. So throughout this first lecture, we're going to be going over setting up the project that involves using Expo and React Native, and we'll also be going over our project structure. So this here is React Native. Now, if you don't know what this is going into initially, React Native is a framework, a JavaScript framework that allows users or developers to write code that will run both on iOS, Android, web, macOS, and even Windows. It's essentially, the way they say it, you learn once and you write everywhere. So you only have to write code once and being able to distribute to iOS, Android, any other platform. And this is very useful for several businesses because maybe when you are making a company or an application, you have to account for several platforms, but development time for those platforms can take a lot of time. So if there's a more efficient and a one code all solution, then a lot of business will usually gravitate towards that. And if we scroll down here, you can see kind of the basics of what makes React Native React Native. Here it's all JavaScript rendered in native code. So this is just all JavaScript code that we write, and it'll be rendered by React Native to display. And there's several applications today that we know are using it. Facebook, Meta, all of the Meta applications are using React Native. This also includes applications like Discord, Shop, Shopify, Skype, PlayStation, and even Tesla. So let's go towards running and getting started with installing React Native. So if we click on the Get Started page, here we have our setting up development environment. Now, if you don't have Node.js, I highly recommend you to install it. This is a very crucial step when you are installing React Native, mainly because it's a JavaScript runtime environment and React Native relies on JavaScript and being able to run it. So if you haven't downloaded it, I'll put this link in the description, but you mainly want to go for the long time service option right here. This is recommended for most users, and it'll also automatically detect your OS, so don't worry about that. You also need an IDE. An IDE is what allows us to manipulate the code and change it. It'll also read several text files or several file types and being able to manipulate that as well. I highly recommend Visual Studio Code. This is what I'll be using throughout these courses. But there's several IDEs you can use. There's Sublime Text, there's Vim, there's also Visual Studio, and Eclipse. But there's several IDEs that you can look up for yourself to see which one you like. But for this course specifically, we're going to use Visual Studio Code. So when it comes to setting up our development environment, we need to use npm. And if you've installed Node.js, we're going to go here and we're going to initiate the command npx create expo app awesome project. Now, if you don't know what expo is, it's a wrapper function for JavaScript or React Native. It allows us to have several functions and features that we can use for React Native that might be harder if we were to do it by ourselves. things like QR code scanners, development environments such as hot reloading. All of that can be perfectly done using Expo. And here you can get a good idea of what Expo also has. We have easy file routing based systems. We can get fast refresh. We can use several libraries such as maps, photos, and QR code scanners. They also have a tool called the Expo Go app, which allows us to scan the QR code. And with that QR code, we can use our own very phone as a development tool. Something that we will write code on our phone or on our laptop, and it'll automatically hot reload on our phone. And this is the Expo Go app. As you can see here, you can run your projects from your own device faster than ever. All we really do is we simply just run our Expo start command from our laptop, and then it'll show up here all our projects, and we can simply just run it and be able to view it. But for this tutorial, we're only going to use the iOS simulator, just so it's easier to see both the code and our application at the same time. Now, let's start with our development environment. If you already have Node.js installed, then you should also have npm and npx installed. What you have to do is simply go into your terminal and go to the specific directory you want to go to and type in npx create expo app awesome project. So let's do just that. We're going to go inside our directory. So we're going to do cd downloads. I'm going to make a directory to hold our React Native project. So we're going to do make directory. We're going to do game review. Oh, we're going to call it critic share. That's what I think we're going to call our application. So we're going to call critic share. And then inside the critic share, we're going to run this command. So that was npx expo -create -app. And we're going to call it the same thing, critic share. Let me just make sure it's the right thing. Yeah. And you can change critic share to be awesome project. It's just essentially a title for your project. So we're going to type enter. I think I might have run the wrong way. So it's create expo app. So we're going to do npx create expo app critic share. There we go. So here it's downloading and starting all our project files, and it's installing all the specific node modules that we need, and essentially just setting up the project to what we want. So now we have our project set up. So what we're going to do is I'm going to increase the text size of this. We're going to do cd critic share, and we're going to do code dot. Now this is what allows us to open this directory, specifically in Visual Studio. So we're just going to press code dot, and it'll show up here. So let's open that. So now with our project open, let's go to our React Native documentation. And also, I'll have all these links in the description as well, along with this, Node.js, Visual Studio Code, and Expo as well, just so you have a better idea of exactly what to expect in this project and what to look for if you want to do more research. Now that we have our Expo app created, this command here will start our development server for the application. So if we just do cd critic share, which is what we did here, and then if we do npx expo start, that will start the development server, and we can run our application through our phone or through an iOS simulator or through an Android emulator. So we're not going to do that just now. We're going to go over the project structure, and then we'll go over actually running the application. But if you want to run it through your React Native application, you have to install the Expo Go app. So as shown here, if you click on download from Google Play or Apple Store, you can do that, and it'll be on your laptop, but just go through your phone. If you have an iPhone, go through Apple Store. If you have an Android, go through Google Play. And then you don't have to connect them, but you have to make sure they're connected on the same wireless network as your computer, or else it'll cause errors. So make sure they're on the same wireless network, and then simply using your iPhone or your Android, just scan the QR code using whatever QR code scanner you have, and it'll automatically open up on your project, on your Expo Go app. And the beauty of this is there's also hot reloading. So if we do make changes to our app.js, which you'll see in the later lectures, it will automatically reload and change the look on our iPhone application or on our Android application. So let's go over our actual project files. Our first and main one is our app.js. This is the main file that will hold our code for our React Native project. This is what file that will be run first when we run our React Native project. So any changes you make here will show up on our React Native project. Inside the export default function app, this is what's returning our UI elements that we want to render. In here, we already have a view, a text, and a status bar. And you might see that this form, or here, let me extend that text. There we go. And you might say that this formation looks quite similar to HTML, and it is. And that's because HTML, or not HTML, sorry, React Native has drawn inspiration from HTML. And essentially what they're doing is they're creating objects. And in those objects, the way to declare them is through element tags like this. So this text tag is an actual object created by React Native. And let me see if I can even go in towards a definition. There we go. This is just a simple definition by React Native. In there, if we go in the node modules, React Native, libraries, text, we can find this file exactly here. But all this does is it displays a piece of text similar to a p tag or an h1 tag. There's also a status bar. This is a component from Expo. We'll go over more Expo specific features later on in the future, but this is just a cool thing to show. Another major thing is our style sheet.create. Now, style sheets is a object from React Native, and this is our way to declare styles for our elements within React Native. Simply, all we have to do is we have to do a const styles equals style sheet.create, and then inside we have to feed a object like this. And inside that object is going to hold keys, which will just be the style tags or the style selectors that we want to select. Now, I don't know if React Native has certain element selectors that you can do. So this is the basic way you have to go about it. And you just simply, when you want to put a style into an object, just have styles equals a styles.container. And we're going to go over more of this file in the later on this lecture as well. Once you run the application, you'll see a great idea of how this comes into play. Our next is our package.json. This holds a bunch of functions that our Node package manager can use, our NPM. So the first thing is obviously name, version, and main. This is stuff that's basic that comes on everything. It's quite required, but it's mainly more for just decorating our project. Another main thing is our scripts. So here we are able to assign certain commands to our project, and by simply running npm run blank, so blank would just be Android, iOS, web, it'll actually execute this command and being able to show that. It's a more short form way of setting commands, and it's easier both on the developer's side. There's also dependencies, and these dependencies link towards node modules. This is what's going to be installed into your node modules folder and what we can use later on in the future. And you'll see that this file changes iteratively as we add more libraries and features that we want for our application. And moving on to that, we also have our node modules folder. This is a giant folder of all of our JavaScript libraries and This is a huge folder that holds all our JavaScript libraries and functions that we want to use and utilize throughout our application. Obviously, this is all used in the background, most of these, but there are some that we can use in the foreground, such as text or view a style sheet, that you'll definitely see come into play. So let's actually run our application. So I'm just going to click save this. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to open up the terminal. This is a cool thing about Visual Studio Code is that you can have your own terminal running within the IDE. So you don't have to have a separate terminal window, such as this one right here. So we're going to do terminal in the upper menu right here and click new terminal. And I'm just going to include, oh, there we go. We'll do it like that. And automatically it'll be in the directory that we're working in. So simply now we're going to run this command right here, our iOS here. So we're going to do npm run iOS. Yep. So you're not going to get this. What's going to happen is it's running on port 8081, and that's because I showed you the demo project, what you expect to see. If you run two React Native projects, it'll ask you this, just simply say yes. There we go. So I'm going to merge these two together, side by side. And there you go. So I'm just going to lower this here. And this is our React Native project showing on our simulator here. And this will also show up on your Android emulator as well. And we'll show you how that works in the future. But this is our React Native project. And you can see here we can even change the text just to even further prove that. So we'll change this to hello. There you go. And this is also the beauty of hot reloading and Expo is that we're allowed to change text within here. And rather than having to rerun it, we just simply have to just change the text and it'll change. So with our React Native project initialized, we can go over more of our app.js function. And as we went through hot reloading, let's go over our styles. So you can see here that we have our style sheet created, and we already have a style set, which is container. How this is setting up is the view. I think the best way I'd look at the view is essentially like an empty div element for HTML. You can have it's a container for holding elements, and you can change those styles, and that can manipulate the orientation of your and it can manipulate the orientation and structure of your elements. So we already see that coming into play here, which is our giving our view, our container, a display of flex, which is just essentially setting it as a flex box. There's also align elements and justify content, so that allows us to put it all directly in the center. And there's also a background color, which is just white. And I can change this background color, so let's do black. And you wouldn't be able to see this because our text is black, but we can do red. There you go. I'm gonna keep that to white though, just to make it look nice. We can also change the justified content so it's all the way at the top. Or I can also remove align items and it'll go all the way to the left. But I want to keep that directly in the center. And that's it for today's lecture. In the next lecture, we're gonna go over setting up dynamic widths to the Dimensions API, putting in more elements like images, and we'll also being able to show how we can manipulate the elements based on the orientation we have. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. So the Dimensions API is essentially an API from React Native that allows us to grab the width and height from the screen and window. And this is mainly more for the screen for like your mobile device, and Windows more for like the actual like browser that you're using. But it allows to dynamically position and size elements based on the device screen. We can also even set the orientation and find if the user is either in portrait or landscape mode, and this is just simply by a Boolean check just to see if the width is greater than the height or if the height is greater than the width. And there's a lot of great examples that we can use Dimension API, mainly for adjusting image sizes based on screen sizes and having a box or headers heights based on the screen's height. And those are really important because when you are making a React Native project, you should understand that a lot of people have different types of mobile devices they'll be using your phone on. So if we were to style our elements, they could look a bit different on a, let's say, an iPhone SE, like a really small screen, or they could look really small on like an iPhone 14 Plus or even an iPad. So having the Dimensions API really helps us to scale our images or our elements in general based on the screen that we have. Hi there. Welcome back. In this course, we're going to learn how to build a React Native app with adapter user interface. This is the first out of a 5-course series where we'll be going over advanced React Native, learning how to create our very own React Native project to be able to deploy on iOS, Android, or web. So in this lecture specifically, we're going to go over the Dimensions API, and we're going to be able to set up dynamic widths along with adjusting image sizes based on the dimensions we have for our screen and window. And this is the official documentation on React Native for the Dimensions API. Simply, all we have to do is we have to import dimensions from our React Native file or a folder. Then to be able to get the width and height, we just simply do dimensions.get and then window. So this could be screen or window. And then we do .width. Here, this documentation also has examples of it. That's also a great tool or documentation for React Native, is that it has examples and exactly how we should implement our the certain features that we want. And on top of that, we can also even run it within our application. So I can try to zoom in this right here. But yeah, this is the beauty of it. We can even run it on iOS, Android, even web. And here you can see it. What you're noticing here is the differences between the window and the dimensions. So here, window is actually grabbing the height and width of this small little window here, whereas the screen is getting the height and width of this whole monitor that I'm currently displaying on. And there's several other uses for the Dimensions API, mainly the add event listener. This is how we're going to determine to know if the user is in portrait or landscape mode. Essentially, what we do is that we just set up a event listener, which is a function that will execute once a certain event causes. In this case, it's change. So this will fire when a property within dimensions object changes. This argument to the event handler is a dimensions value type object. But essentially what we do is that we have the change, and then we just check to see what we'll do here. In our use case, what we're going to do is that we're going to check to see if the user is in portrait and landscape, and that's whenever it changes. So not only that, we're also going to work on, we're also going to add new tags, mainly the images tag, and we're going to go over exactly how that works. So let's start with our code here. here, I'm gonna shorten this down because we only really going to be working with the app.js file. So I'm just gonna move that out of the way, put this a little bit down because we already have this running. So put that down. There we go. Now we have a lot of space to work with. So we want to add an image. This is going to be our logo for now. So what we're going to do is we're going to show import image. Sorry, we're going to import image from top here. And that already gives us access to the image component. So we're just going to do image tag, and make it self-closing. Now every image tag requires a style, which we'll define a little bit later, and it also needs a source. Now, the source, the way you state that changes based on how we have the image. And this is official documentation for images on React Native. Now, you can see here, we'll go through our examples page right here. Let me just zoom out a bit. So what we're doing is we're essentially setting up these styles, and each of these have a logo, have a height and width. Now that's very important when you are setting up an image in React Native. If they're set to 0, essentially the image is not going to appear. But this is important on how we assign a URL or a href tag for an image. What we have to do is we have to do a URL if this is an online image. So in our case, it's an actual asset that we've downloaded and have in our file. And if that's the case, we simply have to put this. The source equals require, and then inside here is just the path towards the image. Now, if it's an online image or something that we grab from Google Images, Unsplash, anything that has a URL attached to it with the HTTPS or HTTP, we have to do source, and then inside that object, we create another object that has a key URI, and then URI will just feed this URL. So we're going to go over that later in the other lecture, but for now, we're just going to go over this method. So let's do just that. So back to our code, what we did is I added a asset, which is just our logo here. This is the logo that we're going to be using for our application. And there's also other logos that we use, but this is mainly more for Expo and their use. So kind of the splash page, and we can even change this. Their icon page, a favicon, an adaptive icon. These are all things that we can change ourselves, and it'll display easily on this. So now inside the source, what we're going to do is we're going to input the requires tag, and then inside here, we're going to do ./assets/logo.png, because that's exactly our file, and that's exactly where it's located. So let's put this back here, and I'm going to set a style for our image. So we're going to do, we're going to give it a class of logo, and we're going to give it a width. We'll do 100 for now, and we'll give it a height of 100. And then let's set that class to be here. So it'll be styles.logo. There you go. Here's our image or our logo here. And there, it's beautifully shown. Now that we have our image tag, I want to make this scale with different screen sizes. And here you have is our difference between our iPhone SE and our iPhone 14 Plus. It's on two simulators running the same app project. Now, this is somewhat of a concern. Now, it looks good, but you should keep in mind that our image here, while it's a smaller screen, looks good, but on this one, it's a much bigger screen and it looks almost exactly the same. Now, say for example, we develop our project and we style it based on a user having an iPhone SE. Now, what's going to happen here is that we have all our elements here, and then once a user who has a 14 Plus uses it, these elements are going to look much shorter than they usually are. Take, for example, this image and this text. They definitely look smaller compared to this, and that's because of the screen size that's much bigger here as well. We have a lot more screen space here, and we're not utilizing that screen space. So that's something that we should highly consider, and that's what the purpose of is for our dimensions API. So back in our code, what we're going to do is we're going to actually press enter here just to give a bit more formatting for our things. I'm also going to format all of this. There we go. So I want to import the dimensions API. And you have to do this outside the export default function. You don't have to, but I do it mainly for the formality. We're going to make a variable, and we're going to call it window width. We're going to make that equal to dimensions.get. This time we're only going to grab the window, because typically the window between phone size is going to be the same as the screen size. So really, window and screen has no, there's no necessity to separate them unless you're working for web. But window.width, then we're going to do const.window.height, use dimensions, get window dot height. And we're just going to console log this. So we'll be, or we'll alert, we'll do alert. We'll do window width, alert, window height. And then once I save this, these two values are going to show up as an alert. We have a width of 667 or 667 pixels, and we have a height of 375 pixels. So now we can actually use this to our benefit. So let's actually go into our logo style, and we're going to change the width and height to be based on the actual window width and height. So we're just going to do window width and window height. And obviously, once I save it, it's going to look massive. Let me get rid of these alert pages so that we don't get bothered by that. And yeah, obviously this looks too massive. So we're going to rely on math, and we're just going to divide it. So I want the width to be window width divided by 2. And I don't want the height to be too big, so we're just going to divide it by 4. There we go. That's a respectable size. Now, one thing I want to use is I want to create a top header here, kind of like it shows a bit more color for our application. So what we're going to do is we're going to do view. We're going to make it self-closing. This is just essentially going to be a block, but we're going to give it a style of styles.header. And then we're going to make inside here, create a styles class called header. And then inside here in our object, we're going to give it a background color. I already have a set color decided, but I highly suggest you guys to research into a color picker. Maybe just literally search up on Google, and I can do it right now. I'm going to do color picker. And you have access to a bunch of colors that we can use and utilize for whenever you're installing your React Native application. But I already have a color set. We're going to give it a width of window width, because I want it to span across the whole screen. And obviously the height's 0, so we're not going to really see it. So we're just going to make it window height. And I don't want to span the whole screen height-wise. I want it to only be about a quarter. So we're going to divide that by 4. Now, this doesn't look as great, and that's obviously because we have everything centered. So what I want to do is I want to make these two elements have a position of absolute. So that way they kind of ignore all the rules of Flexbox, and they kind of work based off a top, left, bottom, and right rule. And I'll show you exactly how that works. So we're going to make this position be absolute. And we're going to make this one also position absolute. And I put a comp there. So now they're on the same page, and that's because we also have this justified content center. So what we want to do here is we want to give it a top of 0, the header. And that'll push it all the way to the top. Same for the logo. I wanted to give it a top of 0. And I'm not a huge fan of how it's directly right in front of this header, so let's give it a top of 5. See if that looks. Maybe 50. It looks good, but now the issue is we're not utilizing our dimensions page. So we just simply have to do window height, and we're going to divide it by 8. I want to be a small value, not too small. There you go, perfectly aligned in the middle. Now, I want to make this have a, I want to put a button, and that button's going to be utilized more in the future, but I kind of want to show the behavior of button, how we go about creating events. So we're just going to import the button command from React Native, and then inside here, we're going to go button with a capital B, and each button component takes a title that gives it text. So we'll just do click me, And automatically the button will show up and we can just click it, but it's going to have no event. So if you want to give it an event, we simply have to state a on press. And then we're going to feed it an anonymous function. So here's our anonymous function. You simply have to declare our anonymous function by doing brackets, our arrow right here, and then curly brackets. And then we're just going to put an alert message. So we'll do hello world. And then right when we click it, we're going to get an alert that just says hello world. Now, we want to utilize this dimensions API to figure out if we are using, if we are figuring out if we're in portrait or landscape mode. Now, for this tutorial, it's going to be kind of hard to show that implementation, mainly because in this, we can rotate it, but it kind of doesn't really rotate it in that sense. It doesn't automatically change, kind of like how we'd expect it to. So if we go here, it doesn't really change its orientation by that means. And I can even go on maps here and see it kind of doesn't change its rotation. So that's something I can't unfortunately show in the simulator, but I think this is something I hopefully encourage you guys to try out and be able to try on your own device if you can. So if we want to test out to figure out if the user is in portrait mode or landscape mode, we simply just have to create a Boolean statement. Now, for this Boolean statement, we have to realize that the user is going to also change orientation. So the way JavaScript works, or React Native, is that when you execute this code, it's only going to occur once. So say, for example, a user changes dimensions, we will get the wrong dimensions based on those calculations. So say, for example, I rotate it like this. Now, this will be, height will be lower than width. But the issue is with React Native is it only runs once, so this change won't occur. What we have to utilize is a useState. Now, if you don't know what useState is, this is the documentation for React. It's essentially a React hook that allows us to add a state variable to our component. And the way we go about this is we do const, and then we state our actual variable, the one that will hold the value. And we also state a change function. This function is what will be used to change the state. And then we just make it equal to useState, and then we give an initial state. It can be equal to 0, Boolean, null, anything. So we're going to go over this in our code. So all we have to do is we have to do import, in curly brackets, useState, and it'll be from React. Then inside here, we have to do const, and we'll just do portrait. So that will hold our Boolean variable, and then we're going to do set to portrait. Yeah. And we're going to make that equal to useState. Now, the way you dictate this initial state will dictate the data type that our variable will be. If you set it to false, it'll be Boolean. If you set it to 0, it'll be a number. If you set it to a quotation marks, it'll be a string. Now, inside portrait mode, we also don't want to make it false like this automatically. What we're going to do is we're going to do window height is greater than window width. This Boolean statement here essentially dictates whether or not this user is in portrait mode. Because when you're in portrait mode, the height is going to obviously be greater than the width. So now with this set, we just simply have to set an add event listener. So we're going to call our dimensions API and call the add event listener function. We're going to give it the keyword change, so that way it knows, or JavaScript knows, that we're looking for a change within the dimensions. We're going to pass an anonymous function, and this function is what's going to be called when this event occurs. And we're going to feed it a parameter. That'll be window. So whenever this change event occurs, it'll cause this anonymous function to execute, and it'll pass the window along with that. And with that window, we can get the height along with the width. Sorry, that'll be window.height and window.width. So now we have a way to check if this is going to be portrait or not. Now let's actually utilize this in being able to display if this is in portrait or not. Now, like I said before, this simulator doesn't have that implementation in there. So we're just going to utilize a text element just to see if this is in portrait. Now, there will also be a lot of use cases where you need to conditionally render elements. And to go about that, you can't simply just put if statements in here, like if portrait, execute this code because that really doesn't work. These if statements will cause an error. You can see that right here. So the way to go about this is we're going to call a curly brackets, and this is what executes JavaScript code inside here. Then we're going to do portrait. That checks if this is true, and our return statement. In these brackets, essentially whatever we put in here is what will be displayed as UI. So we'll do text is in portrait mode. Oh, I forgot to I put stars. You're supposed to put ants. Sorry. You're supposed to put ants. There we go. There we go. We're in portrait mode. Awesome. So we were able to get this phone or our React Native project to be able to display if this is in portrait mode or not. And that's it for today's lecture. In this lecture, we were able to go over a Dimensions API to be able to dynamically set the width for our images, along with any other elements that we could please, such as this main header box. We also went over the elements of button along with image, and we were able to conditionally render certain elements, such as our text. And we were able to do that by checking whether or not this phone was in portrait mode by the utilization of the Dimensions API. In the next lecture, we're going to go over managing our screen content, mainly specifically with the keyboard avoiding view. We're also going to improve our user interface by just using our Windows dimensions, adding more elements here and there. And we're also going to write specific code based on the platform that we're using. That includes things like iOS and Android. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. So when it comes to managing screen content, we have to account for our keyboard taking over input or buttons on the screen. If you're an application that has a large form, that keyboard can get in the way and can affect the user experience. Luckily, with keyboard avoiding view, a component from React Native, we can adjust the screen's elements when the keyboard comes up. This will allow us to push elements up so the user can see the elements covered by the keyboard. This is perfect use case for user input in forms. We'll also be looking at the Platforms API. In here, it's an API from React Native that logs the OS the user is running on. This will allow us to dictate which content is shown based on the OS. And there's many options, which include iOS, Android, Mac OS, Web, and Windows. And this is very important for future use cases where there are some components that only work on Android, iOS, Web, and Windows. So when you're writing code for just one platform, for all platforms, you should be able to account for that platform and be able to dictate which UI to render. Welcome back. In this series of lectures, we're going to learn how to build a React Native app with an adaptive UI interface. This is a part of a five-hour mini course bundle where we'll be learning advanced React Native, allowing us to create a game review website or a game review application through the use of React Native. In the previous lecture, we went over the Dimensions API and being able to dynamically adjust our images width and height based on the dimensions we get from the screen and window. We also went over other elements such as buttons and being able to determine if the user is in portrait mode or in landscape mode based on those given values. In this tutorial, or in this lecture, we're going to go over managing our screen content, specifically with the keyboard avoiding view, going over some basic user interface and basic user input. And also, we're going to write platform-specific code using our Platform API in React Native. So back in our code, we're going to add a couple more basic UI elements, mainly a text input for now, and a touchable opacity. So we're going to go over text input first. And essentially what we're doing is we're going to import that in our React Native. And our text input will just be a area or a bar upon which the user can input certain text. So we do just text input like that. We're going to set a placeholder. We're going to make it equal to input name. And we're also going to give it a style, or else it's going to be kind of hard to find. So we'll do styles and the styles.text input. So I'm going to save that, and you can kind of see it here in Masterclass placeholder, but if we removed it, it's going to be hard to tell. So let's add a bit of styling for our text input. What we want to do is we want to have a border width of 2, a border radius of 5, we want a padding of 15, and I want to have a margin vertical. Oh, that's why. My bad. So let's go ahead with adding styling for our text input. So we're just going to set our class. We're going to call it text input. Oh, text input. Then we're going to give it a border width of 2 pixels. I want to have a border radius of 5, to kind of give it a bit more roundedness. I also want to give it some padding, give it some space in between the text, and I also want to give it some space between the top text right here by giving a margin vertical of 10 pixels. So let's save that. There we go. And you might be wondering why are we not utilizing Dimensions API? Because there are some elements that really, if we're only managing within pixels less than, let's say, 25, 30, that difference won't make much of a change when it comes to differing screens. So we don't have to always rely on the Dimensions API. It's mainly more for big elements that we know will take up a big part of the screen. So we have our text input set. Let's work on adding a touchable opacity. But essentially, a touchable opacity is a wrapper for making views respond properly to touches. Now, this can be anything. Say, for example, it could be a view element, that could be a box, it could be a text. And if you remember how we handled touching in the last lecture, essentially we just assigned a button class, which is right here. And these are physical buttons. These are all libraries handled by iOS and Android specifically. But we might want to change that. What if we don't want the buttons to look exactly like this? And that's where touchable opacity comes in. It allows us to assign a view, and inside there we can add elements and make it able to respond to text. So let's add touchable opacity in here. So we're going to do touchable opacity. Then inside here, we're going to make a touchable opacity parameter, or not parameter, a component. And so I'm going to put a text. We're going to call this. We're going to do also click me. So you can see here right now, and if we click on it, you can see that's actually responding to our clicks, but we don't have anything assigned to it. So we're going to send on press for this, and we'll just make it have an alert for now. Also click me. Great. We also want to style this, so let's call this, we're going to give it a styles tag, and it will just be styles.button. So let's add some styles to that class. We're going to give it a background color of the same color that we initialized before. I didn't put in quotation marks, so let me just go do that. I'm going to give it a font size of 24 pixels. I also want to give it a padding, so that will be 10 pixels. And I want to give it a color. That way it's distinct from the actual background color. Something unexpected. Oh, we forgot the colon. Save that, and there we go. We have this. I'm also going to give it a text align, so of center, just to make sure it's in the center. There we go. So we can click on this, and we see the alert actually properly works. So now a concern we have is that, say for example, a user clicks on the input name, we know the keyboard will automatically show up. On simulator, on the iOS simulator, I have it set to where keyboard doesn't show up, you can just simply input text in here through the keyboard. But if the user is actually using a phone, something like this will pop up. Now you can kind of see the issue here. What happens if the user wants to click on this button? And it's kind of easier now, so we'll make it harder right here. We're going to input a view, make a self-closing view, give it a style. And if you want to do inline styling as well, you just have to add another object in here. It's the same thing as doing this, but simply we just give it this object. And we're going to give it a width of 150 pixels. I don't know, hard to tell. Oh, right, sorry, a width, or height. There we go. Now, let's say I click on, actually, we'll do 50. It's a little too much. That's fine. So let's say I click on this. Now you can see here that this button is kind of hard to press. If we had this on an actual phone, this would be bad UI. Now, how do we handle this view being able to react to when this keyboard shows up? And with that, we got to utilize the keyboard avoiding view from React Native. The keyboard avoiding view is essentially a component that allows us to automatically adjust its height, position, or bottom padding based on the keyboard height to remain visible. And this is mainly while the virtual keyboard is displayed. So really all we have to do is, it's quite a simple fix. We have to import the keyboard avoiding view from React Native and just simply swap the view tag that we have at the beginning with keyboard avoiding view. Keep in mind, we also have to set this behavior as well. This is what tells us if we need to add padding, height, or bottom padding. So let's go do just that. Inside our code, we're going to import the keyboard avoiding view. And I know it's a lot of imports. Don't worry, this is not something you probably would see in the future. It's just something you'd, mainly because all on one page. And we'll get over that in the future lectures as well. So let me remove this. And we have that all in there. I'm going to remove the text to be hello. There we go. And now, while we have keyboard avoiding view set, we're going to set this and change it to keyboard avoiding view. Same with this, keyboard avoiding view. I'm just going to style the properties, and then now we have behavior. So now with our behavior that's added, we're going to make it equal to padding. And that's a good thing about VS Code is that for React Native, when you have things like this, it already knows what options we have we can use, and it allows us to choose it rather than having to guess. Now, obviously, you don't see any change occur. Watch what happens when I click on the input name. All of these elements just get pushed up, and that's good. So you can notice there's a bit of a styling issue with this. It kind of goes up above, and we don't want it to look like that. So I'm going to utilize a little bit more styling. Just going to press return to get rid of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all this inside a view tag. And we're going to give it a style of styles.info container. We're going to change that. So now, inside info container, I simply just want to give it a display of flex. So let's put it right here. Sorry, I'm trying to put a comma here. I also want to add a Z index for our header and logo. This is what allows the text to not actually overlay on top of the image, but actually go under it. That's kind of how I want to imagine this going away. So what we're going to do is inside our container, I'm going to give it a padding top first, a window height, and we're going to divide that by 6. That way there's a bit of distance between here and here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the header, there we go, a Z index of 1. I'm also going to give the logo a Z index of 1. And I believe that should fix it. So let's say we click on this. There you go. It kind of shows under the logo. And I can get rid of this padding top as well, kind of just to show more. And it kind of goes deeper in there. It's kind of hidden behind this logo and behind this blue header. Return. So now that we have a bit of styling done for this website, let's go and work on the Platforms API. The Platforms API is an API from React Native that essentially logs in the user's OS and what they're using on. It will give us the OS version, if it's a TV, and allows us to determine whether or not, or allows us to determine what device the user is actually running our application on. So our use case for this is going to be quite simple. What we're really going to do is we're just going to display text based on whatever the user platform is. So let's go back in our code, and we're just simply going to import the platforms. Then inside our text, what we're going to do is we're going to do text input. We'll put it right here. And we're just going to make this in square brackets. It'll be platform.os. That's it. And these are all just lowercase, so it'd just be iOS, Android, and Mac, Mac OS, Windows, and web. So here we are able to display iOS. This one doesn't look as good, so I'm going to actually do conditional. So we're going to do if platform.os equals iOS, and we're going to display text Apple device. I also want to account for Android devices, and I'm going to show that Android device as well. I will boot up a emulator. We can show it. Android and text Android device. There we go. And this changed. So we were able to dictate whether or not the iPhone or whether or not a React Native application is on iPhone or iOS or Android. So let's actually show this on an Android device and show that this platform OS is actually working. So I'm just going to go on my terminal and I'm going to initiate my Android emulator. And here we have our Android emulator that's running. I have the iPhone emulator running side by side as well, just to show the difference. I can't make this full screen, so unfortunately it'll have to be on the desktop. But there we go. Here we have our exact screen ported over. And you can see here our image also scaled because of that dimensions API that we discussed before. But the main showstar is here. Here we're able to use our platforms OS library to figure out if our users on the Android device, and we're able to display Android device, and on here also display the Apple device. You can also see here that there's a difference in styling when it comes to buttons. So see, for example, this button looks a little bit different than this one right here. And yeah, that's really the beauty of the platform OS is that it allows us to conditionally render certain UI elements. Because later down the line, and we might not cover it in this lecture or in this series of courses, but later down the line, you realize that certain implementations can only be enabled on Android and iOS. Say, for example, using native modules that allow us to only use certain modules within Android and certain modules within iOS. If we were to have that all in just one code without any if statements or conditional rendering, essentially it would break the code for either iOS or Android, depending on whatever issues it has. So essentially, we can conditionally render our UI elements based on the platform OS. Say, for example, Google Maps doesn't work on iOS, but it only works on Android. If we were to have a Google Maps feature in our application, any iPhone users would automatically break. It wouldn't be able to run that application because it doesn't exist on the on iOS devices. So we can simply just do conditional rendering to check whether or not they're on iOS or Android and be able to give them that feature before they even run into the issue or error before it happens. And that's really it for today's tutorial and course. In this tutorial, we were able to work on using the managing our screen content through a keyboard avoiding view, being able to hide content or being able to scale our content based on when the keyboard shows up. We're also able to introduce new UI elements such as the touchable opacity and the text input. We also were able to use the platform OS to describe or find out whether or not to use it on the iOS or Apple device. For this entire course, we've also went over the adaptive user interface, being able to use the dimensions API to adjust our images based on the dimensions, and going over our initial project setup as well. Thank you so much for watching. In the next lecture and course, we're going to go over building our app with navigation. So we'll be going over React Navigation Framework and being able to implement a drawer navigation container. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. So this is a preview of what to expect out of this course, and if you recognize this, this is essentially our UI adaptive interface that we created in the first course. But what's different here is we have our header, which is our login. This is actually our navigation container, and if you click on here, our hamburger menu, here you'll see our drawer navigation container that pops up. So we're going to click on home, and this is actually a stack container itself as well. So this is just simple user input, but we can include something like a game name. So we'll put The Witcher 3, and then we'll do click me. And here we have an image with our title, which is passing the exact title that we put in the game input or in the text input. We have a cover for our game, and we can also go back, just like how a stack would operate. So React Navigation is a framework for React Native that handles navigation across several means. It contains several containers such as a stack, drawer, and bottom tags. And we will also go over explain these containers in the next lecture. But really, we're all here just to initialize React Navigation and be able to show its process. It's a very great stable of React Native and is used by many to easily handle requirements that involve navigation. So when it comes to setting up React Navigation, we have to install a couple libraries using our Node Package Manager. We have to install our React Navigation-native, and we also install React Native Screens and React Native Safe Area Context. These are all important libraries that allow React Navigation to operate properly. We also need to wrap our app.js in a navigation container, and that allows us to use navigation containers such as stacks within our application. But we'll go over that later on throughout this lecture. Welcome back. In this series of courses, we're going to be learning Advanced React Native. And we're going to be learning on making a mobile application both on iOS and Android. Specifically, an application allows us to review games and publish them. If this is your first time seeing this, I highly recommend going back to your first course and going over that. In there, we went over adaptive user interface and being able to set up our React Native project as well as building the initial UI. In this course, we're going to be going over navigation. More specifically, we're going to be going over setting up navigation, such as React Navigation. We'll be going over several app navigation types that involve stack, bottom tab, and drawer. We'll also be utilizing the use navigation hook that allows us to navigate across screens. We'll also be passing data across these screens, such as using routes and navigations. And finally, we'll be implementing a drawer navigation as well as nesting navigation containers such as stacks. So this is the official documentation for React Navigation. This is something that will be in the description as well, but it goes over what requirements we need for React Navigation, such as using React Native, Expo, which is higher than version 41, TypeScript if we are using TypeScript. But this is the main area that we should take away from this, is that we have to run npm install React Navigation /native. And then we also have to install certain dependencies, considering that our project is an Expo managed project. Now that's something that I highly suggest you guys to research into in regards to the difference between Expo managed project and a bare React Native project. In the gist of it, essentially in our file structure, if we were having a bare React Native project, it'd have a generated iOS and Android folder. But for an Expo managed project, this is all run through Expo within its files, so we don't have the file. So it's a much more lighter version. So let's actually work on installing this. So I'm just going to put this beside us. And I already have the terminal open along with our project. We just simply had to run the same command, which was npm run iOS, which just runs this command. You can do the same if you have an Android. If you want to run on Android, just simply do npm run Android or npm run web. But we're going to go on iOS for this. So we're going to run npm install at React Navigation -native. And this will install our primary React Navigation libraries. So I'm just going to clear this up. We're also going to do npm install, or I think it was npm, let's check again, npx expo install. So it's npx expo install React Native Screens, right? And React Native Safe Area Context. We can actually install several libraries at one command, so we don't have to do two commands for this. We can actually just combine these two, and npm will realize to just ground these two devices or these two libraries. So I have an error. npm. Oh, I didn't do safe area context. So remember to do safe-area-context. There we go. So it can recognize that library. Nice. So we're going to clear that changes. So now that we have React Navigation installed, we're going to go and actually change these screens up a little bit. So typically when you are making code for React Native, you want to separate most of these files and their functions in folders. So in this folder, we're going to call it screens, and this will handle all the UI that we have for our screens. So we're going to make a new file, and we're going to call this login.js. And then we're going to introduce the boilerplate code for React Native. So it's just simply import React from React. Oh, it's in commas. There we go, React. We're going to import a view text and style sheet from React Native. We're going to export default const, or it's just export default login equals to. Inside our login function, we're going to return a view. And inside that will just be a text box to say hello. We're also going to initiate a style sheet for this UI. So it'll be style const styles equals to style sheet.create. And inside this function, we're going to initiate an object. So we're going to have a container. Give it a flex of 1. Background color of FFF. Justified content. And we're going to line the items. So that's our basic boilerplate code for this. Obviously, when we save it, nothing's really going to happen. But we essentially are going to port over all this area, all this stuff, into login.js. So let's actually just do that now. I'm going to import all these important features. So we're going to import these specific things. I don't think we're not going to be using the useState, but we're going to utilize the dimensions API. So we're going to keep that. Inside here, we're going to not use this because we don't really need the useState. So actually, I'm just going to delete that. And we're going to delete this. And then I'm just going to copy and paste all this keyboard avoiding view stuff, all the stuff that we made before, and we're going to put it right here. I'm going to format all this code. And I'm also going to copy all these styles because we need these styles as well. So let's do just that. And format that. So now to actually see this come into play, we're just going to take that out of the way. We don't really need the styles anymore. We're going to remove this. Sorry. Then inside view, we're going to just remove that as well. Remove all this unnecessary code because they have it all in login. So now I'm just going to import login, and then we're just going to call it like a command. Style sheet has been declared. All right, so we don't need that anymore. Yep. So now our code's here showing perfectly fine. And now we're going to do most of our work here on our app.js now. So what we're going to do is we're going to import our React navigation stuff. So we're going to import a navigation container. This is vital for any container that we're going to use, whether it's stack, bottom, tab, drawer. So for now, we're going to just demonstrate a stack navigator just to prove or show a simple way of our navigation. So this is the documentation for stack navigator, which will also be in the description as well. But here we have to, when we are using a specific type of navigation container, we have to install it as well. They use that to keep this framework lightweight, only to install the navigation containers that we're going to actually use. So in this case, we're going to use stack and drawers, but we'll go over drawer later. But to do that, we have to run the command npm install react navigation /stack. So let's just do that. Open the terminal. npm install react navigation /stack. We also need to make sure we install our React Native gesture handler. That's if we have an Xmod managed project, which we do. So we're just going to copy this command, and we're going to run this, like that. And when we do that, inside our app.js, we have to import React Native gesture handler. And I'm going to remove this terminal. So now that we have our stack container actually installed, we're going to do import create native stack navigator from React navigation stack. And I believe that is supposed to be native-stack. And just make sure my code is right, because it kind of goes over here how to go about it. Okay, it's just create stack navigator. So we're going to do stack, and then it'll just be create stack navigator. Now, to initiate our own stack navigation container that we're going to make, we're going to create a const variable, and we're going to call it stack. And we're going to make it to equal to create our stack navigator function, like so. Then all we have to do is we have to simply do, inside we're going to move view, we're going to do navigation container, and then we're going to do stack dot navigator. Then inside we're going to create a stack dot screen. We're going to give it a name. We'll just do login, and we'll do component. We're going to make it equal to the login page that we already made. And that's it. So we just simply have to save it. And there we go. We have our very own stack navigation already installed into our application. We can remove some of this code here. So we'll move that. And obviously there's no changes being made here. And that's because we only really have one stack screen. So React Navigation is taking that as a signal to understand, okay, we don't need to display a title because we only have one screen. And we can actually demonstrate showing that more. So let's make another screen. We're going to call home.js. We're going to do this the sample boilerplate code. So let's be import React from React. We're going to import view, text, and style sheet from React Native. We're going to export a default home, which equals to a anonymous function that will return a view container which contains a text. So we'll do hello. We will do const styles equals to style sheet dot create. We'll make a container. Inside it'll be a flex of 1, a justified content in the center, and we're going to align the items to be center as well. We're going to make the background as well equal to FFF to be white. And let's set the styles for this as well. So in our app.js, we're going to import the home page, and we're going to make another stack screen. Give it the name of login, or sorry, not login, home. Make the component equal to home. So we actually came into an error when we were trying to figure this out. We have to make sure our assets are properly located, so it's just going to be that. So let's reload that and fix this debugging issue. Property portrait doesn't exist, so that should be right. So we're going to remove this code actually because we don't need that. And status bar does not exist, so let's remove that because we're not using that. Great. So now you see our header is actually showing up, and we're going to just do a simple navigation. So all we did here is that we passed navigation inside our login function right here. You just do that in the brackets, just do curly brackets and navigation. You can also change it by just doing params. And I'm going to go more in detail about this a little bit later, but essentially you just do params, you just have to do params.navigation. But if we just do curly brackets, it realizes that we just have to go in that object and just access that. So we do navigation.navigate and home, so let's click on that. And there we go. We have initialized navigation for our application. But we can also go back, we just click on the login page here. This will go back to our home page here. And that's it for today's lecture. In this video, we were going over the setting up of React Navigation, as well as initializing our very own stack navigation container, just to demo the use of React Navigation, how it works. In the next video, we're going to be going over passing data across screens and being able to properly manage navigation across these screens, going over the params and actually going over this navigate function as well. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. So we briefly mentioned before that there are several navigation containers that we can use for React Navigation. The three main ones are stack, bottom tab, and drawer. So the stack is essentially what we did last time, is that it replicates the nature of a stack, or a stack data structure. It allows pages to exist on top of each other and to be removed from the top. And sort of follow this last in, first out protocol, where the page that's last in, or that came on the stack last, will be the first one to leave. A bottom tab is essentially a tab or a series of tabs that exist at the bottom of the application, and allows users to switch between several pages anywhere on the application. You might have seen this bottom tab navigation be used in a lot of mainstream applications like Instagram, for example, where you can change between sharing an image or going to your reels or going to your messages. That's essentially the use of a bottom tab application. A drawer navigation container is a side menu that pops up, allowing users to switch between screens anywhere on the application. This is very common in Android applications as well, where you kind of have this side menu where you can kind of look wherever you want. You can probably see them very commonly in regards to Gmail specifically, where you can view certain inboxes on that drawer. The Use Navigation hook is a React hook designed by React Navigation. It will allow us to access the navigation functions from our set navigation container, whether that's stack, drawer, or bottom tab. It's not only navigation, but other functions such as getting the page ID, the titles, and many more. A great use case for this essentially is if you're navigating from page 1 to page 2 within the code from page 1, we simply have to call it navigation.navigate home, and you'll see this coming to use later. When it comes to passing data across screens, we have to simply pass it by passing a routes parameter within the function declaration. You can kind of see that right here. By calling routes.params and the variable name, we can simply access the data sent when we navigate to a screen. A great example of this is when you're within the login page and you can navigate to the home, you can simply just pass the username that the user logged in with. And yeah, you can see kind of how we're accessing it here. So within the login page, we call this code, and within the home page, we'll call this code. And you'll see this come into play later on in this lecture video. Welcome back. In this course, we're going over building a React Native app with navigation. This is the second course of a 5-course series where we're going to be learning over advanced React Native applications. If this is your first time seeing this, I highly recommend you to go check out our previous videos, such as our first course, we went over adaptive UI. In this lecture specifically, we're going to be going over setting up React Navigation. And how to do that is that in this course, we were going over building an app with navigation. And in this lecture specifically, we're going to be going over the ability to pass data between screens, as well as navigating across certain screens as well. We'll also be going over navigation options to kind of demonstrate how we can change certain options for certain screens we have set. So this is the code that we have right now. This is where we left off with. We're going to go towards navigation across certain screens. So here we have our navigation.navigate home. I'm going to go through this process again, just in case, kind of seemed rushed in the last video. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a screen, and we're going to call this user.js. Say, for example, it's a profile page. I'm going to import the boilerplate code that we have from React. So that's just import React from React. We're going to import view, style sheet, and it will be text from React Native. We're going to export default user and make that equal to an anonymous function. Inside that anonymous function, we're going to return a view container and make that container contain a text, and it'll just be hello. We're also going to set styles for this, so we're just going to do styles equals to style sheet.create. Inside that function, we'll pass an object. One of the keys will be called container. We're going to set flex to 1, justify content in the center, and align items in the center. We'll also make the background color equal to FFF. We're going to set the styles as well to be equal to styles.container. So we have our user screen set inside our app.js, which holds our navigation container. We're going to import user, because remember we exported it as well from here. So we're going to import user from .screen/user. Then we're going to instantiate a stack.screen component. And if you don't remember, the way we set up our Stack Navigator is essentially we imported the create Stack Navigator from React Navigation Stack. We also have a navigation container navigation container. And what we're doing in our app.js is we're returning our navigation container, which contains our Stack Navigator, and then inside there we initiate the screens. Now, the way we got this stack is that we just made it equal. We made a variable, and we just made it equal to create Stack Navigator. And this is just what returns a empty stack component. So in our stack.screen, we're going to make a new screen. We're going to call it user. And then inside component, we're going to make that equal to user. Now, everything's all good, and it works perfectly, but the thing is we're not navigating to it. So let's actually change our login.js function. Here you can see our navigation, and we're going to go over this now. So let's say we want to pass data across screens. Now, React Native has handled several features of that, and what it does is it actually allows us to use params. We can send params throughout this feature. So say, for example, on login.js, if I can find it. So say in our login.js, we have a component, and we're going to just call it user. That user will actually be passed down into here, and we just simply have to do, it'd just be const user equals to params.user. And we can access that data that we passed down from here. Now, React Navigation has actually handled several of these things that we passed down, mainly due to the nature of it being a stack.screen. So what we do is we're going to actually log params, because I want you guys to get an idea of what exactly that's being sent through here. It's kind of hard to tell when it's just this. So we're going to log console.log params. That's not what I want. Params. There we go. And open up the terminal. And I'm going to redo this. So let's do R. And this is our params object. Now there's several things, and it's kind of hard to tell what it looks like. So actually, let me put this in a JSON formatter. And this is our params function in a JSON formatter. It's kind of hard to see, so let me see if I can zoom in. Here we have our navigation container, and it has several functions like add listener, can go back, dispatch, get ID, get parent. But the main one we're focusing on here is navigate. This is what allows us to go from screen 1 to screen 2. There's also one that says go back, and that allows us to go from screen 2 to screen 1 as well. And there's also several things like, for example, route, where it just has the key, the name, and the params. And if we just do params.params, this will just be an object that we can just essentially grab. So let's remove that out of the way. And how we're going to go about this is we're just going to do, inside here, it'll be navigation. Or actually, let's do inside, we'll do curly brackets, and we'll call it navigation. Now what we're doing here is, I'll open the terminal back up. We are simply just isolating all the things related to navigation. So we're removing anything from here, the route, and we're just grabbing all this stuff here. And that's because we're actually, in the curly brackets, we're calling navigation. So now, all we have to do is inside here, I'm going to remove this. When we click on this, I want the user to essentially go to, I want to call it the navigation.navigate, and we're going to do the user. And I'm going to save this too. So let's click on this and see what happens. And here you see is our user screen. I can even change it to hello you, like that. Now, another way that we can use navigation is using the use navigation hook by React Navigation. We don't simply have to pass this. It's the same way as just using this. It just is a more, it's stating exactly what we're doing rather than having to pass variables down. So let's say I want to change my home screen, and I'm going to change this actually to go to home. So let's say in here, I'm going to make a button. And then inside, we're going to do button on click. Go here. We're going to make it do that. And I'm going to give it a title of go to user. So go back, go here. So we have that. It's not going to do anything. So what we want to do is we want it to navigate to the user. So simply all we have to do is we have to call on the use navigation hook. So in order to use the use navigation hook, what we have to do is we have to simply import use navigation from the React navigation library right here. And then inside here, we have to initiate a variable, which is just equal to use navigation. And then we have to call this function here. This is obviously not being navigation go back, but there's several features or functions that we can actually grab from here. Essentially, the use navigation allows us to access all these functions here without having to pass it as a parameter. So let's do just that. We're going to import use navigation from the React navigation here. We're going to make navigation equal to the use navigation hook or whatever gets returned. Then all we have to do is we got to do navigation. So, oh, I spelled it wrong. Navigation. And then it'll be navigate. And you can kind of see that it's actually listing all the functions that we could do now. Whereas before, we didn't really get anything. So it's more of a surefire way of getting the exact variable you want with the exact functions. So we're going to do navigate to user. So there's a bit of an issue I had here. So previously I put on click, and that's not the right function for a button. It's supposed to be on press. So just change on click to on press. And now everything should work as we expect. We just go to user, and you can see here our navigation works like we expected it to. So this, along with using the params.navigation, are two easy ways of navigating across screens in React Navigation. So let's go over actually demonstrating passing data across our screens. So we're going to work in the home.js file here, and what we're going to do is I'm going to import the use state because we're going to rely on simple input. So actually I'm going to condense this, so we just do like this. That allows us to condense it. I'm going to create a const variable, and it'll just be name and set name. We're going to make that an object, which is equal to the result of use state, and that will just be an empty string. I'm also going to import text input, so it'll allow us to import text. So yeah, change that to button. And then I'm going to change this text. We're going to call it to, all right, we have to go back. So I'm going to change this text, and we're going to call it to state a game name. And then inside we'll do text input. And inside the text input, I want to set the value equal to name. I want it to do an onChange text. So what we'll do is we'll pass a function. It'll be text, and then make that equal to set name text. And I'm going to set a style for it. So I'm going to do inline styling, and the way you do that is you just do style equals to an object, and then inside you initiate another object, which is essentially just replicating this. What we're going to do is we're just going to make the border width equal to 1. And that does not look as good as I thought it did. So we're going to make that width of, we'll do 100. Make it 200. You know what? Let's make it a separate class. So we're just going to do text input. Because my rule is if it's more than 2 styles, there's not much of a necessity to do inline styling. If it's more than, or I would say if it's more than 5. We're going to make it border width 1, width of 200, font size of 25, and then I'm going to change this, so remove this object, and it'll be styles.textInput. And we'll give it a padding of 5. So let's just try that out. Oh, we have an issue. So let me wrap this in a function block here. Set name is not defined. Is it supposed to be an array? I think it's supposed to be an array. It is supposed to be an array. So the curly brackets, it's not supposed to be const curly bracket name. It's supposed to be const square bracket, kind of like an array. So now that we have this set up, I'm going to format some of this code, and you'll see why. When we want to pass data across screens while navigating, we simply have to pass another argument inside our navigate function. And this object is what we're going to be passing, or is going to represent the data that we're passing. So all we really have to do is we have to set a key. So we'll give it name, and we'll make that equal to name. And then inside users, the way to access it, we're going to have to pass a route. This route will hold all, if you remember, this params is equal to an object. This is what will be passed over. So simply all we have to do is we have to just do const name equals to route dot params dot name, and we can console log it to the name. And then I'm going to open the terminal back up. So we'll just do new terminal. Let's go back to the other one, and then go to user. So we'll just do Spider-Man. Oh, wrong one. Spider-Man. And there you go. You can see that our name got transferred from the home screen to the user screen. And really all in here, we're not stating Spider-Man at all. We're actually just displaying the hello text. It's getting transferred from our home.js file into the user.js file. So let's actually change this text, and we're going to make it equal to name. So by doing that, we'll change this to Spider-Man, and we can get rid of this console log. We can even make this more simple by simply just putting this inside curly brackets, and seeing as it's the same name as this key ID, React Native recognizes that, and all it'll do is it'll just map it over. So I'll go back, and we'll change this to Super Smash Brothers. There we go. Our child got transferred over easily. Now, while we were also able to easily pass data across screens like this, what if I want to remove this header right here, and I don't want it to block it up? Remember, I want to keep the style to where this is kind of branching from the top of the screen, and now with this header, kind of looks like that's not doing it. So let's actually go over screen options. I'm going to remove these files, not remove it, but just move them out of the way. And we're going to go over screen options. Now, what screen options allows us to do is that it allows us to set up certain options for our navigation, or specifically our screens. And that allows us to, for example, perform several functions. One of those cases being the header shown. So I'm going to actually put some spacing here, and we're just going to make this into options. Inside there. There we go. So what we're doing here is we're setting in options equal to an object. Kind of think of it as like we're setting up styles again. But inside this second object, we can set several values up. So if we do header, we have several things like setting the header background, making the header left. We can make the header shown right here. So with all those options shown, let's just make the header shown equal to false. This in turn allows us to remove that header. It can show for other screens as well. So say for example, we go to the home screen, you can see it shows up back here. So it's not like we lose the back button. But this is probably useful in some cases, whereas you're in the very first page. You don't really need that back button, and you might not need this title as well. So if there's no necessity for it, simply you can remove it. And it kind of goes back to the way that we want it to look. And that's all it for today's video. In this video specifically, we went over the use navigation hook, allowing us to navigate across screens. We're also able to pass data, such as simple strings, across our screens. And we also set certain navigation options dynamically for certain screens, such as this login screen. In the next lecture, we're going to go over building our core navigation container, which is going to be a drawer navigation. We'll also be nesting certain navigation containers, such as a stack navigator, and we'll be making our application more like an application that we aim to see in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. So these are drawers navigation containers. Essentially, it's a type of navigation container that allow us to have a side menu anywhere on the application. It'll contain links to screens that we set on the navigation container. So for example, in this case, it's import, gallery, slideshow, or tools. And we can also set labels for each of the drawer screens that we set up. We can also do other things beyond that, such as setting profile pictures and other pieces of information in the menu that we can style and choose to whatever we feel. And you've probably seen a lot of these use cases for drawer navigation containers, such as, for example, Gmail. I know with Gmail, you can simply just pop it out and you can see all the inboxes in regards to the accounts that you have. And it's a quite common container for Android applications as well. Now, throughout these lectures, it kind of seemed like these navigation containers are more isolated, that they only work by themselves. But that's actually the opposite. You're able to actually nest navigation containers with each other. So say, for example, we want to have a bottom tab navigator with the stack navigator, or have a drawer tab navigator along with the bottom tab navigator. We can also have a drawer navigator alongside a stack navigator, which is actually what we're going to be implementing throughout this lecture. Most often we'll be nesting navigation containers as there'll be many use cases that require it, such as having a login page that also nests stack navigations to handle signup. There could be some cases where you have a forms page that allows users to see a list of forms while also being able to add your own. So say, for example, you're Instagram and you have the bottom tab navigator as you see. But you also want to implement the messages feature to act as a stack navigator. And that's kind of where that plays, where the messages acts as a stack operation where we just go from the messages to our group chats to the specific chat. And the Instagram as a whole has a bottom tab navigator that we can use wherever we want. And essentially to nest it, we simply need to pass the navigation container as a component rather than the screen itself. And you're going to see that come into play near the end of this lecture. All right there. In this series of courses, we're going to be going over Advanced React Native. In this course specifically, we're going to be going over React Navigation and introducing navigation to our React Native application. If this is your first time seeing this series of courses, I highly recommend you to go check back on our previous lectures. In today's lecture, we're going to be going over adding our drawer navigation to React Native, as well as nesting navigation containers for application. And we're going to make this application go forward in regards to what we are looking for at the end of all these courses. So, a drawer navigator is essentially a navigation drawer that appears on the side of the screen. It can be opened and closed via a gesture or a hamburger menu on the side, and it allows us to access all of our screens that we want to show anywhere in the application. So we're going to actually introduce this into our application, and the way to go about that is we need to install npm install React Navigation Drawer. So I'm going to copy this code here, and we're going to go inside here in our terminal. And inside our terminal, I'm just going to clear this. We're going to do npm install React Navigation Drawer. There we go. We also already installed React Native Gesture Handler, and we also need to install React Native Reanimated. We can simply copy this. The beauty of Expo and NPX is that it recognizes that we've already installed this. So really, it's just going to overwrite any files that need to be updated, and if not, it just does nothing. So let's copy and paste this code. It'll just be npx expo install React Native Gesture Handler and React Native Reanimated. And don't worry, I'll leave these links as well in the description so you guys can follow along and copy the code if you need to as well. So just press enter. There we go. Now, when it comes to React Navigation drawers, this is simply the way we go about adding it. We have to create a drawer navigator. Then we have to essentially put it inside the drawer navigator and then put that inside screens. So let's go about just that. We're going to X out of this, and inside our navigation, or inside our app.js, I'm going to import a create drawer. Is it create drawer? Yeah. Create drawer navigator from React Navigation Drawer. There we go. Just had to respell that, make sure it was good. And then what we'd have to do is we have to do const drawer equals to create drawer navigator. And we're going to change this. I'm going to leave some of these components. So for example, user will be taken out, but don't worry, we'll leave it here just for now. So we're going to remove that. And then inside, I'm going to remove this. So it'll be, drawer.navigator. And then inside drawer.navigator, we're going to make two screens. It will be we're going to give it a name of login. And we're going to make another drawer.screen and give that the name of home. The component will be equal to login. And we're going to make the component equal to home. So actually, I'm going to rename these files. We're going to rename it to login screen and login screen and home screen. Makes it easier in regards to anyone reading our code to understand what we're actually doing. So let's rename this into home screen, or update the import. We're into login screen, update that import, and we're going to rename this to user screen. Update that import. We're going to change this to screen, so it looks like that. Change this to login screen. And we're going to change this to home screen. So move that out of the way. And then inside our app.js, we're going to just do login screen, home screen, and user screen. And we'll change those components as well. That way, for any other developers reading our code, it makes a little bit more sense. So we're going to dismiss this and reload it. So this is an error I expect you guys to come across when you are adding a drawer screen. This error I came across. And the way to go about this is essentially we haven't introduced the plugin of React Native Reanimated into our React Native project. And the way to go about that is we just go to this file here, the babel.config.js, and inside here, specifically on line 4 after that, so it'll be line 5 for you guys, would be plugin. We're going to add a plugin key. Then we're going to just do React Native Reanimated. And it'll just be /plugin. Now, it's not going to show up properly. I can try to do a hard reload, but I don't think it's going to work. So we're going to actually go into our terminal. New terminal. And our first one, we're going to press Control-C to end the task, and we're going to rerun it. That way, it kind of builds all these files here, and we're actually able to see this come into play. So I'll move that out of the way. We're going to go to Expo Go, back in our application, and open up Critic Share. Oh, I see the error. We didn't do plugins. So we unfortunately had to do that. And it says here, detect a change in babel.com to restart the server to see the new results. You may need to clear the bundler cache. So we're going to do that, actually. It'll just be npm run iOS, and we'll do clear. So same thing, we're just going to try that out one more time. So we have the error again, and I think that's because of the way we're running the code. So we're going to stop the server. I'm going to do npx expo start, and we're going to give it a clear flag. So that will clear any sort of cache that we might have. There we go. So it's running on Expo Go, so we're going to press I. We're going to open up again one more time. There we go. For the debugging process, if it looked like a mess, essentially the way to go about it is that you go to your babel.config.js, and that's located right here inside your main folder application. Then what you're going to do is you're going to introduce plugins, the key. So it'll be plugins : inside that, you're going to feed an array, and you're going to feed react-native-reanimated/plugin. Then what you have to do is inside your terminal, you're going to have to restart the server. So press Control-C to end the server. And then you're going to feed the command npx expo start. clear. What this does is it'll clear any sort of cache that we have, and it'll re-download all the reanimated plugin and allow us to use this the drawer navigator. So we're exit out of that. So let's open our hamburger menu, and you can see here we have home and login. So let's click on home, and you can see here we have our actual. If you remember the UI of our home, this is kind of what it looked like. So we properly have drawer navigation containers inside our thing. Now, we haven't used the user screen right here. And I want to do that by nesting a navigation container inside home. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to nest a stack navigator inside our home. And in there, we'll be able to navigate between the home and the user screen. And it'll basically be the same way that we're going to go about adding these features. Where it'll just be you input a username, and that username will be transferred over. And this is the way about going to nesting navigators. These two links will be in the description as well. But essentially what we're doing is that we have a home function here, which is a tab navigator. And then inside our stack navigator, we're just passing in the home function, which is this. So essentially it's just putting this code into here. And we'll be doing this, except opposite. Instead of a tab, it'll be a drawer. Or sorry, instead of a tab, it'll be a stack. And inside of a stack here, it'll be a drawer. So let's go about that. The way I'm going to go about that is inside screens folder, I'm going to create a new folder and we're going to call it Navigator. Navigator. Inside here, we're going to call it home navigator.js. And simply what we're going to do is we're just going to call all the same boilerplate code. So it'll be import as React. Wait, no. Import React from React. We're going to import the create stack container. Create stack container navigator from at React navigation stack. Yep. Then we're going to import home from. Keep in mind you have to go out of the folder, so you have to make sure that you're actually getting the right thing. So it'll be home screen. We're also going to import user screen. And keep in mind, that's the beauty of the VS Code is it automatically detects which function or which component we're using, and it automatically imports it. But if you're using an ID, just remember to go back one step. So from here, you go back into the screens, and then you look for home screen.js. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a stack container, and we'll do create stack navigator. We're going to export the default function, which is just going to be home navigator. Then inside the home navigator, we're simply just going to return a stack navigator or a stack.navigator. And then we'll just initiate the stack.screen. We'll make that equal to home, and the component will just be home screen. Let me move this out of the way. So inside this stack, we're going to initiate this stack.screen as well. Give it a name of user, and give that component of user screen. Remember in the last video, I made the header on the top disappear as well, and I want that to be shown as well. So what we're going to do is inside here, we're going to make the screen options for this one be the same. So it'll be header shown false. Now, we saved it and everything should be working, but we haven't introduced this home navigator to our component. So I'm going to remove these two here, and I'm going to remove the stack navigator. Same with this code here. And what we're going to do is we're going to change home. So actually, we're going to import home navigator. What we're going to do is we're going to go inside screens, then go to navigators, then home navigator. Then simply, we're going to replace this with home navigator and see how that works. Now, if we just go to home, hello, go to user, and there we go. we've perfectly nested two navigation containers within each other. I'm going to style this up a little bit. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an asset that I've made inside here. So I've added this Witcher 3 game cover. This is all just AI generated. So we have this cover and I'm going to introduce that to this. So we're going to go to user screen. So user screen, and then inside here we already have that set up. So we're just going to do an image. So I'm going to import that. And then inside here, it'll just be image. We're going to set the style. We're going to make it to, we're going to export it to our styles variable here. We're going to make the source equal to require assets and witcher3.png. And then inside we'll set the game cover. How we're going to go about that is we're just going to make the width of 250 and the height of 450. Remember, usually the game covers, it's much longer height-wise than it is width-wise. And yeah, there we go. We have our Witcher 3 game cover. So I'm going to introduce a button. And we're just going to make this to be able to allow us to go back. And I'm going to utilize the use navigation hook. So we're going to do import use navigation. Const navigation equals to use navigation. Then we're going to do on press navigation dot go back, and we'll give it a title. Go back. And there we go. So let's change this. So we'll just do The Witcher. And I've just been recently playing this game, so that's kind of why it's been on my mind. And it's been a great game. So there we go. We have successfully nested navigation containers in our React Native application. We're able to essentially have a drawer navigator here. Inside this drawer navigator, we have our login page, is a simple page. And in fact, I can delete some of this data. So we're going to remove some of this stuff here. We're going to go inside login screen. And I'm going to remove all this stuff because we're not really going to be using it. This is just decorator text here. Yeah, we have our login screen. This would be the home page. And then inside we have our login. We go to home. And then inside our home, we're just going to go to user. This is our stack. So what we're doing actually is we have a drawer navigator. One is displaying a screen and one is displaying a stack navigator. So say we go to the stack navigator. Now what it's doing is that telling React Navigation is to show that default screen. And that default screen is the home screen. So what we're doing is we go into the stack navigator, show the default screen, and it basically performs all the functions of a stack navigator for whatever use navigation function we create. So inside here, we'll do is go to user, and it acts like a stack. So this is the last in screen. We're just going to go back, it pops it out, and displays whatever was last. And that's really it for today's lecture as well as the course. Overall, we were able to create a React Native application that handles navigation, and obviously we'll be adding more and more. So as more UI is introduced and as more functionality is introduced, obviously it will be more of a requirement for navigation. But overall, we were able to set up React Navigation Framework into our project. We were able to also set default screens as well as using the use navigation hook to navigate across those screens. We're able to also pass data across screens, such as the text here. And on top of that, we were also able to stack navigators within our drawer navigation container as well. We were also able to stack navigation containers with each other. So for example, in this case, we were able to have a drawer navigator contain a stack navigation container as well. In the next course, we're going to be managing app state with Redux and Context API. We'll be initializing a global state management tool within our project, allowing us to access data app-wide, and we'll be able to utilize the Context API from React Native. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good day.